History on Blast, episode 38, The OG Sore Loser. I'm Hillary, and I'll be your host, as in this episode, we put Aaron Burr on blast for not that one, nope, here we go, treason and trying to become the Emperor of Mexico. Aaron Burr did a lot, and, this is just one of the things that this man needs to be roasted for. But first, this month in history. On March 5th, 1933, the second day of his first term in office, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared a 4-day bank holiday and called for a special session of Congress that started on the 9th. This began his first 100 days in office and the development of the New Deal that pulled the nation up out of the Great Depression and put us on a path toward our national pastime, punching Nazis.
Hello, everybody. This is Trevor, host of the History of Persia. I'm telling the stories of the empires that dominated the Middle East from the fall of the Assyrians until the rise of Islam. I'll cover topics like the 300 Spartans, the origins of endurance racing, the losing side of Alexander the Great's conquests, and at least one evil priest who replaced and impersonated the king. If those stories and the stories and cultures of Greece and Rome's greatest enemies sound interesting to you, come check out The History of Persia, wherever it is you find your favorite podcasts, like this one.
Okay, so Aaron Burr. I'm sure that if you're listening to a podcast, you're at least moderately familiar with the smash hit Broadway musical Hamilton, based on the life and times of one Alexander Hamilton of the Revolutionary War fame, Federalist Papers, all of that. Basically, he set up the entire economic system and banking system that our entire country relies on, and really did a lot of other fantastic things along the way. Slightly less fantastic is the time that he was killed by one Vice President Aaron Burr while the man was Vice President in a duel in Weehawken, New Jersey that was illegal. That part of the musical is slightly inaccurate. Dueling was illegal in New Jersey, but the punishments for dueling were less harsh in New Jersey than they were in the state of New York. So that was why people were dueling in New Jersey, not because everything is legal in New Jersey, although I love that line. But Aaron Burr. Killing Alexander Hamilton, while it absolutely tanked his political career, was potentially not the stupidest thing that he did, even really that decade. But for the rest of his career, Aaron Burr was born February 6th, 1756. From there, in fairly short succession, his father and mother both died, leaving him an orphan by the age of 2. He moved in with his grandparents, who then also died. And he ended up, he and his sister were raised by friends of the family. He went on to a very successful education. He went to Princeton. He was studying law when the Revolutionary War broke out, and he enlisted in the Army of the Revolution, the Continental Army. Although he was never promoted to a rank higher than lieutenant colonel, he did participate in the battles of Quebec and Monmouth, which were two fairly major battles. From there, he went on to finish his education to become a lawyer. He became the Attorney General of the state of New York. He was also a senator and eventually vice president to one Thomas Jefferson. The famous duel with one Alexander Hamilton happened during his last year as vice president, while he was campaigning to become the governor of New York, because he had discovered that Jefferson was going to drop him from the 1804 ticket and pick up a new vice president. The whole duel was a squabble over the fact that Alexander Hamilton had made some comments potentially to a friend that were reported in a paper, which then resulted in, potentially, in Burr's loss to one Morgan Lewis, who was more or less little known. But either way, Burr blamed him and the duel ensues. So, with Hamilton dead and clearly any shot at the presidency gone, what's Aaron Burr to do? The answer to that is apparently become Emperor of Mexico. Yup. So, his grand plan in 1805 is to head to the west, where he goes to the Allegheny Mountains, down the Ohio River Valley, and goes into the area known as the Louisiana Purchase. He had leased some land there, known as the Bastrop Tract, and his plan was to start setting up sort of a settlement area, which he would fill with farmers, and they would, more or less start expanding into the West. Now, apparently his super duper secret plan, because he was on the, southwesty bits of the Louisiana Purchase, was that he figured eventually they would piss off Spain, probably, and a war would ensue wherein he and his heavily armed-ish farmers would take Mexico, because he had decided he would be their emperor. Now, here's where things get slightly wacky, because he had decided to work with one General James Wilkinson, the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army, who was at New Orleans, and he was also the governor of the Louisiana Territory. The intention there would be that he would help train and outfit Burr's expedition, help them out, be sort of on-hand-ish if anything went down and the settlers needed imminent help, with, again, the intention being that they would start a war with Spain and get Mexico out of the deal. Or at least, like, Texas or something. What actually ends up happening is that our buddy Wilkinson decides that he's going to rat out Burr's crazy plans, which, by the way, were super illegal, because of this fun boy we have called the Neutrality Act of 1794, which states, "If any person shall within the territory or jurisdiction of the United States begin or set on foot or provide or prepare the means for any military expedition or enterprise against the territory or dominions of any foreign prince or state of whom the United States was at peace, that person would be guilty of a misdemeanor." Now, I will note here that that's of a misdemeanor, which is like a baby crime. Misdemeanors are like jaywalking. Aaron Burr gets accused of treason because Thomas Jefferson is still president, and he's not having any of Aaron Burr's shit, basically. So Burr gets brought back to Virginia, to the United States Circuit Court at Richmond specifically, in 1807 to face the charges of treason. He actually is arraigned 4 separate times before he's indicted by a grand jury. And the only physical evidence that they had to present to this jury was a letter that Wilkinson said was written by Burr. However, when the jury examined it, they very quickly discovered that this was actually Wilkinson's handwriting and not Burr's at all. At which point the evidence gets completely thrown out because we have laws about how evidence works. And that doesn't stand up to any standard of evidence. Especially, because Wilkinson's whole explanation was, well, I lost the original, so I made a copy. Which doesn't... No, that's not how that works, Wilkinson. That's not how any of this works. So, they needed, witnesses. And according to Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, which explains what treason actually is and how you punish it, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act, or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. Basically what that's saying is Congress sets the punishment and you have to have at least 2 witnesses or 1 person who did the treason who confesses. That's the only way someone can actually be guilty of treason. Well, in Burr's case, he's certainly not confessing to treason. Especially not in open court. And no one else stepped up either. So now we only have Wilkinson saying that Burr actually committed this crime. Which leads to Chief Justice John Marshall refusing to convict. Even when Thomas Jefferson goes, "But could you do me a solid, my guy?" Marshall's like, "No, that's not how the Constitution works at all, Mr. President." Which is important. You should read your Constitution. Give it a look through. There's actually a lot of very specific information in there about how our legal system works and how it doesn't work. Either way, though, Burr is like, you know what? I'm done for a bit, 'cause that didn't work. I mean, got acquitted, not dead or in prison. That's nice. Still, not Emperor of Mexico. At which point he's like, you know what? I'm in an extreme debt. Let's go to Europe. He gets a friend to give him some money for a boat and goes to Europe from 1808 to 1812, where he just kind of hangs out in England on Craven Street in London. Because sure, he actually becomes friends with Jeremy Bentham, who you may remember from an earlier episode because his corpse still attends meetings. And really, I kind of love the fact that Aaron Burr hung out with that guy. From there, Burr returns to the U.S. to take up practicing law again. He just starts using his mother's maiden name for a while because he's hiding from his creditors because he's still deeply in debt. Now, what's important to note here is that historians do not agree whether or not Burr was actually part of this treason plot. Some of them agree with Marshall that there isn't the evidence to say yay or nay, and other people cite a man named Bowman, who admitted while being interrogated that Burr had planned to raise an army and invade Mexico, that Burr believed he should be Mexico's monarch. And we will never know. There is, short of resurrecting Aaron Burr and be like, hey, what were your plans? there is no way for us to ever find out because no one ever wrote it down because, lol, that's illegal. And pro tip, if you're doing illegal shit, don't write it down. So that's just about going to do it for us for today. I have one important message before I go into the usual sort of closing outro stuff. That is, if you are in the United States and you are listening to this on the day that it drops, it is Super Tuesday, and that means that you should get out and vote in the presidential primary. I know it's not the big, actual presidential election, and I know that in a lot of places it may feel like your vote doesn't matter, but if you actually look at the numbers for percentages of people who are eligible to vote versus those that do, if all of the people who don't vote for whatever reason got out and voted, it could completely change the numbers that we see in each election. And the primary is the best time to make your beliefs about your candidates known. Because at that point, it is about really pushing for the best exemplar of the change that you want, of the, government that you want. And yeah, later you may have to be willing to, slide a little bit on certain policies to get closer to edge in a direction that you want, but the primaries are extremely important. So make sure that you get out there and you vote. I know I will be. And now for the usual closing announcements. As always, I would like to thank Defy the Mall for the use of their song, Keeper of Histories, for the intro and outro of our program. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, if you just want to talk, if you have an episode topic you would really like to hear covered, you can contact me at historyonblast@gmail.com. You can find me at historyonblast on Twitter. There is a Facebook group and page. They're linked together, so if you search for one, you should be able to find the other. Feel free to come in and join us. We talk about all sorts of things. That's also where you can find the episode transcripts if you're interested in seeing a written transcript of what happens in these episodes. And as always, thank you for listening.